let me share something with you that I learned about story. So actually, when I was starting this podcast, I was seeing all the podcast clips, and you'll see clips that have a podcast on the top of the screen, the Mr. Beast text, and then GTA on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, like if I edited my videos like this, and it wouldn't be hard. I could find some AI service. I could hire some VA to do it for fairly cheap and have these crazy edits. But one day I was posting a podcast clip on Facebook Reels, and I don't go on Facebook, I'm too young. But right when I go to post my podcast reel, I see a video, it pops up right when I open the app, 50 million views. And it's the worst quality video I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. It's like 140p, like looks like Minecraft. And I'm like, how could this horrible quality video have 50 million views? So I watch it. And essentially it's like this dude, and he's sitting in what looks like a game show audience, but he's not on stage, he's in the audience, and then the whole audience stands up and gives him a standing ovation, and he's just sitting there, and then the text explains the story. And essentially what had happened was that guy was from Germany, and when he was younger, he helped all these Jewish kids escape Nazi Germany, and every person in the crowd was a Jewish kid that he had saved, and someone had organized it so that they could like give him a standing ovation, thank him for saving his life, even though he didn't realize it. I mean, obviously he realized it after. And I was like, wow, the story is so good here that even though it's the worst quality video I've ever seen in my life, it has 50 million views. And that was another thing that pushed me to not be so jumpy with not only editing the podcast, but also the clips, because I'm like, if I just learn to edit everything so great, then I might be like tricking people into watching. But I'm not like saying I'm not going to do those things, but if in the beginning I focus on becoming a better speaker and a better storyteller, and I make it about this first, it will probably be a better investment than just editing everything as crazy as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that video, and I watched it all the way through. Definitely pulls at the heartstrings. It's very touching. I think it speaks to the fact that content is king, right? Yeah. You can say content is king. You can say the story comes first, right? And you're right. If you don't, if what you're filming, what you're talking about, what's actually happening on camera, or whether it could be just audio, if that isn't engaging and brings you in and relates to you in some way and touches your emotions, slapping a great edit on top and trying to fix it in the edit is not going to fix it, right? It's not going to make it a great video, a great podcast. And that's technically part of consulting, right? It's not it. We look at things from let's say we're going back to the fact that we won't make a video if we don't think a lot of people are going to watch it. We're making sure that this is a topic that is going to have room for those moments that really bring someone in and really engage people. So
I have a question. So we're both in agreement that story is king. That's how you change someone. Story is not only how you get views, but it's also how you impact someone and change their life. What can you do for the people listening? They want to be a content creator, they want to be a podcaster, but I mean, you can focus on YouTube because I know that's your specialty. How can you put story first? Before filming, during filming, in the edit? How do you actually go about that?
Yeah. I think that one way to look at any sort of story is that there's always 3 acts, right? Mm-hmm. There's the build, the conflict, and the resolution. Okay?
Yeah.
That's the most simple form of a story, and then there's the character arc. And with the character arc, this person who's the protagonist goes on this journey.
Yeah.
And very traditional in the storytelling world, where that person goes on this journey, he wants something, and there's conflict to getting what he wants, and then he either achieves what he wants or he doesn't, whether succeeds or fails. He comes back to the same place, a changed person, right? So a lot of the time when we're working on videos, it's very important that if it's going to be a great video and it's not just a video that will just pull views for the sake of pulling views, it's gotta, the person that is the protagonist in the video has to have a good why. Like, why am I making this video? Or why am I doing this podcast? And so in your case, you know, you bring on these guests with podcasts, and the first act is kind of like getting into, you know, what is it about this person that's interesting for the audience? What can they learn? And although it's not as like, it doesn't align perfectly with the 3-act structure, by the end of the video, not only do you come to a new understanding and perspective, but also so does the audience. And so you walk away from the video changed in some way, shape, or form.
Well, dude, it's funny that you say this, because I've tried a number of things in my research and my preparation. So at first I started how most people would probably start, is they research a guest and they write a list of questions. What I didn't like that when I did that, I became an interviewer. And I love interviews. I love consuming interviews, but I also love consuming conversations. The difference between an interview and a conversation is, like, generally interviewers change the guest every time. So if in that aspect, I am more of an interviewer. And generally conversationalists have a co-host and they talk about topics rather than, like, I'm not interviewing my co-host every time. So it's like, but there are differences. Like, if I'm watching a Huberman podcast, I might just go scroll through the list of names and then click on the first name that's appealing to me, and it's going to be an interview. Whereas, like, someone's watching Call Her Daddy or whatever, they don't really care who she interviews. They're watching Emma Chamberlain. They don't care if it's alone or who she interviews, because they know the conversation is going to be good. And so that was something where I was like, you do pigeon yourself a little bit into becoming an interviewer when you change the guest every time. But I knew that I wanted to be a conversationalist. So I was like, how do I change that? So instead of writing questions, I started writing topics, which is like, I'm not going to have a list of questions to ask Blake, but I know that Blake's very knowledgeable on YouTube and storytelling. So I'll write storytelling as a topic, and then we can discuss it. We can share and that's kind of where I'm at now. But you're sparking an interesting idea. Is like, I wonder, what if I researched a guest? And this is not something I would do with a guest like you. It would be more of a guest that I'm sharing their story. So someone who has a crazy story, where it's more about, like, them, their life experience. So what if I researched them, and then instead of writing topics, I literally wrote the story arc. I was like, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 as a podcast. And I don't know. I'm just trying to take what you're saying and, like, how would I apply that to my work?
Yeah. No, there's a lot in that. I think one thing that I started thinking about when you were saying, you know, with an interviewer, it's much more like you go down the line, you check off the questions you're asking. And then with a conversation, it's more free flowing, right?
Exactly.
When we're planning videos, it's very important to, and I don't like that I just used the word plan.
Yeah.
But when we are writing out, you know, how we're thinking that a video will go, as far as these are the shots we need, these are some talking points. We come from a perspective of being able to get onto the shoot, and you're not planning necessarily, you're preparing.
Yeah.
Okay. So what that means is, yes, we have an idea for how we want the video to flow, but it's very important to allow for those spontaneous moments, right? Yeah. To allow for whatever comes up, whether it depends on the type of video or the podcast, but to put this in a direction of what you're doing, I think that preparing in a way where you do have those talking points, but then being open to veer off the path into something else that comes up is great. You still have some sort of structure to it, but also you're open to the fact that maybe there's something that will come up with this specific topic or a tangent that will turn into something even greater than I had ever planned for or prepared for or expected. So I think creating structure is important, but also leaving room for those moments that you just cannot plan for.
So I have a question. Like, when you're planning a video, the act 1, act 2, act 3 makes sense to me. So it's like, just for the audience, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but the main YouTuber he works with is Brandon Williams, and he is a fitness influencer. But you would think, I mean, depending on how much YouTube you watch, you would think fitness would just be going to the gym, but they don't stop it there. They'll do fitness challenges. They'll do fitness. There's always a story being told through the perspective of fitness, which is actually quite interesting. I do like a lot of those channels. But let's just say, like, give an example. I did 10,000 push-ups in one day. Whatever. It's like, you know, the character, the issue is the 10,000 push-ups, and then he's going to struggle to overcome it, and then he's going to overcome it. But when you talk about the story arc of the person, of the character, and how they're going to change, can you prepare that ahead of time? Or do you just leave that up, how the video happens, or how does that go?
Yeah. So yeah, with the fitness entertainment niche, there's really a lot of opportunity for storytelling because it's also entertaining, right?
Yeah.
Like people there are the content creators at the purest form would be like Sam Sulek, right?
Yeah.
He does a video.
We need to talk about him.
Yeah.
He's a case study for
sure.
sure.
No, and I early on when we were talking about, you know, you don't like to edit your videos, I was thinking about him. And you know, people take away something different from him. He has a different value proposition. For Brandon, we want people to walk away from the video being entertained and or motivated, inspired to take on being more active in their life in some way, shape, or form. With that, we keep those two things in mind when we're, you know, writing out the story. And when it comes to like planning out the different, let's say, talking points or shots that you want to get, I think depending on not what you say, but how you say it, you're able to really get that story across. So I'll try and think of an example of a video. Okay, so there are a lot of videos where it's much more clear cut as to how we want to write it because we have more control over what happens. Right? But there are other videos, like an experience type of video where, let's say there was a video we did where Brandon wore an age suit. It's a suit that makes you feel like you're 80 years old. And his goal, his why at the beginning, and how we originally were kind of going into this, how we were writing it was, he wants to see if he's going to be able to complete his normal daily routine, which is very rigorous, a ton of training, with this age suit on, right? But as we're filming the video, and this was just one day of wearing it, having that plan in mind, but also being open to behind the camera as I'm filming, how is Brandon responding? What is he thinking while, like, what are our conversations off camera when we stop recording and we go on to the next thing? And one through line that I was getting is the fact that he couldn't wait to take it off and how grateful he was that he didn't have to go through this pain every day of being constricted by the weight of old age, right? And with that new understanding and new perspective, we then decided to shoot the end of the video in a very specific way, lining up specific shots to really bring home a new message that was learned in how Brandon had transformed through the video. And part of me doesn't want to give away how the ending of the video, but I guess what I would say is we filmed it in a way where it brought a lot of perspective to the fact that it's very important to not take your youth for granted, because one day you're going to wake up and it's not going to be like you're wearing an age suit. You're not just going to be able to shut off this suit. Yeah. So the end of the video is filmed and put together editing wise in a way where you have Brandon take off the suit at the end of the video. He's so stoked that he gets to go back to his normal self. He's relieved, but then it immediately brings in the idea that one day he's not going to have that choice, that opportunity to just shed off that old age. And so that I guess would be a good example as to how you can really tell a great story and prepare for it. And that does go back to the fact that I was talking about how you can't just go down your line and check all the boxes and every time you're not going to have the best story possible. It's very important to be aware of where things are going and how they're developing throughout the video, throughout the podcast, and seeing if there's a different angle, or maybe not just an A plot, but also a B plot that you can add in there that will then really provide a much more of transformative experience, and really highlight a more transformative experience for the people on camera, but also a transformative viewing experience for the audience as well.
Dude, thank you for such an in-depth answer. That was awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm happy I was able to think of a video that like really aligns with that, because there are others that we do that are more public challenge. It's really straight up. It's like we go in, we're challenging the public, usually Venice Beach, to see if they can accomplish some feat of strength. Your why is, let's see if someone can do this thing. And throughout the video, there's build and fall from it, and then it ends up being a challenge that's extremely tough. The video only really ends when someone accomplishes that thing by the end, and that is much more like, we know, even though we don't know who's going to show up that day, we're going to stay out there filming until eventually someone does it, and then that's kind of how we have those things.
And that one's not like, as you're probably going to, the end is going to be the fact that someone could do it, rather than,
or we break expectation. If we're thinking about, because when I say that, I'm thinking in my head from the YouTube consultant perspective, or just strategy perspective, like, oh, well, the viewer probably knows every time, like, if once this person finally does the feat of strength successfully, the video ends. Sometimes we'll bring an opportunity to break expectation, have that happen earlier, and then introduce an even greater, more challenging feat of strength that they have to achieve. And in that, again, it's not spontaneous. It's like we wrote that out. So they're two very different styles of storytelling, and I think also just intention when it goes into like creating the video.
Interesting.